Welcome to the webinar Sustainable Procurement of Buildings, Project Design and Delivery System, hosted by Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency in collaboration with World Resource Institute. The webinar is organized under the umbrella of Building Efficiency Accelerator. We are pleased that more than 128 participants have registered for this webinar, so everybody, welcome. My name is Aristeidis Tsakiris and I'm a research assistant at Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency conducts research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and serves as an energy efficiency hub for Sustainable Energy for All initiative. We also support Buildings Efficiency Accelerator with hosting different webinars from various partners. Last, I would like to mention that we're recording this webinar and probably will be available on Basecamp, but on C2E2's knowledge management platform, we have many other webinars and resources on energy efficiency in building and other sectors. So if you're interested, you're welcome to follow the link and find out more. Now I would like to hand over to Debbie.
Hello all, and thank you so much for joining this webinar on the Building Efficiency Accelerator and specifically on sustainable procurement. I'm going to provide first just a brief introduction to the Building Efficiency Accelerator and then we'll dive into the procurement topic material. The Building Efficiency Accelerator is a program under the UN Sustainable Energy for All initiative, which has one main goal of achieving sustainable energy for all by 2030. And this is fed by three objectives about universal energy access, doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency, and doubling the share of renewable energy. The Building Efficiency Accelerator, while it impacts and touches on all three of those objectives, is primarily under the second energy efficiency objective. And under this objective, there is the Global Energy Efficiency Accelerator platform that was established by Sustainable Energy for All in order to address energy efficiency in a number of different sectors, as you see here. And the Building Efficiency Accelerator specifically looks at promoting sustainable building policies and practices worldwide. The BEA partnership currently has 23 subnational jurisdictions, seen here, from all over the world. And as you can see on this map, we have a large representation in all different regions, including Southeast Asia, Central Europe, Latin America, and everywhere. And we're really excited to be kicking off work in these initial 23 cities. We do expect that we'll be growing to include more cities in the coming year and beyond as we work towards those 2030 goals for the Sustainable Energy for All platform. In addition to provide support to each of these 23 cities, we have over 35 different global partners as part of the Building Efficiency Accelerator, including nonprofits, multilateral organizations and associations, as well as private sector companies and service providers. And many of these organizations are represented on this webinar today. And so we are really looking forward to being able to provide the expertise and technical advice of experts in each of these organizations to those 23 cities to help accelerate action on the ground. So why is building efficiency important? It has a very large impact. Buildings consume 1/3 of all energy demanded globally and account for about 1/4 of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And there are really long-lasting implications about buildings. So buildings, once they're built, last for at least 40 or maybe even over 100 years. And the decisions that we make today can lock in either low impacts or high impacts depending on the choices that we make. And sustainable procurement feeds a lot of those choices. There are also many benefits to building efficiency. There are economic benefits. Each dollar spent on energy efficiency avoids more than $2 in spending on energy supply. There are a lot of social benefits that you can see here, and of course the environmental benefits of not only energy conservation, but also conservation of building materials and water, as well as climate resilience. In order to accelerate building efficiency policies, the Accelerator works through a public-private collaboration or partnership and commitments from the municipalities that enable the implementation of more ambitious policies and projects. And these can address a number of barriers, as you can see in this graphic. Primarily, though there are technical barriers, we often know what those technical solutions are, but primarily we find that it's the institutional and awareness barriers that we're working with municipalities to change. All the stakeholders on the left-hand side can come together to take the different actions that are listed here in order to produce energy-efficient buildings. Finally, what is it that cities are signing up to do when they join the Accelerator? In order to feed towards this Sustainable Energy for All overall goal of doubling the rate of energy efficiency in buildings by 2030, each city commits to implementing one enabling policy, implementing one demonstration project, and tracking their progress, as well as sharing experiences with other governments. These policies and projects are defined by the cities according to the priorities that they have, and that work with the projects and policies that are already ongoing in that city. And the global organizations provide that expertise to help them accelerate the implementation and hopefully do it in even a more sustainable way. The BEA provides a number of supporting roles, including helping the cities with that prioritization process, so figuring out what policies and projects they want to implement, providing trainings and tools and expertise through webinars such as this one, as well as in person, helping to connect cities with potential funding opportunities and helping cities to create pipelines of fundable projects, and then also providing international recognition and collaboration through international events, knowledge sharing with their peers, and other similar opportunities, regional events, things like that. So we're very excited to be able to have this presentation focusing specifically on sustainable procurement, one of the action areas that the Building Efficiency Accelerator focuses on. And with that, I will pass to Farid for his introduction.
Hello, can I see my screen?
Yes, Farid, everything is okay.
I don't have it here. My screen is not showing. I was looking at Debbie's, but my screen, my presentation is not showing on my screen. Shall I go back to mine?
Farid, I think we have to press the Adobe icon.
Which icon? Sorry, I did. I did press that. Oh. Well, I'm going to use my own presentation, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Okay, then I'll share it with you, if you can hear me. Huh?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, very well. So I'll go there. Okay. Well, thanks for giving us the opportunity to present the sustainable public procurement of the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns. It is quite a long name, and I'm not sure all of you are familiar with what we call, in short, 10YFP. So the 10YFP is a global framework of action to enhance international cooperation and to accelerate the shift towards SCP patterns. It aims at assisting developed and developing countries towards that goal. It's really a product of the Rio+20 conference, where it was reaffirmed that sustainable consumption and production is a cornerstone of sustainable development. And this came after Johannesburg in 2002, and even in Rio, the importance of shifting to sustainable consumption and production patterns was acknowledged. What is the vision of this international framework? It is that fundamental changes in the way societies produce and consume are indispensable for achieving global sustainable development. And it says that all countries should promote sustainable consumption and production patterns, but not only countries, it should be also the work of major groups, all major groups, and all these should play an active role in changing sustainable consumption and production patterns. In Rio, it was decided that 6 programs would be targeted and prioritized at the beginning of the framework. And these are, you can see them on the screen, and you can see that sustainable buildings and construction was from the start prioritized and considered to be an important program in this framework. But you can see also that there is a sustainable public procurement program, and obviously today the topic goes across buildings and construction and procurement, and that's why we're happy to present you the work we do on the SPP program. So the objective of the SPP program is first to build the case for SPP. We believe that there is still a need to make the case and to show that sustainable public procurement is an effective tool to promote greener economies and sustainable development. The aim is also to make sure that we increase collaboration and we improve the coordination between all the stakeholders, which is not the case for the moment, and that we allow a better access to information and capacity building tools. Very often all the producers of information, the ones that have the knowledge, do not disseminate or not enough this knowledge. That's why we have put in place, and we work closely with our SCP clearinghouse that I will present you in a moment. For the moment, the program has 100 partners. It was launched in 2014. We're increasing gradually the number of what we call partners, who are the members of the program, and they are distributed pretty much in on all the continents, and with a very good organizational diversity. So you have governments, you have international non-government organizations, NGOs, consultancies, representatives from the private sector, even though there is not enough representatives from the private sector, and we're having trouble engaging them fully in the program. This is something we're working on. I mentioned the fact that there is a one-stop shop where you can find all resources on SCP. So for those of you that are not familiar with the existence of what we call the SCP clearinghouse, please click on the below or the link that you see on the slide, and this will really put you in a very interesting platform where there is a number of resources that are available on different aspects of SCP, but also you can find agendas, news, and collaborative tools. So please become a member. We need to have a platform where we concentrate all the important information on SCP. In terms of work, we have 4 main work areas. We, of course, favor support to implementation on the ground, which is our first priority, but we also work on assessing implementation and impact. So how much of sustainable public procurement is being done by governments? How can we measure the rate of penetration of sustainable public procurement? Also, what are the impacts on greenhouse gas emissions, on creation of green jobs? This is something we don't have yet the tools to really measure, and we work on establishing international frameworks to harmonize these metrics. We also work on identifying obstacles to promoting innovative solutions in the field. For example, how can we better include SMEs in public procurement? And we work on improving the collaboration with the private sector, because the private sector is supplying the goods and the services, but they are also procuring themselves and trying to put in place green purchasing policies. Sorry, going back to this slide, we also have what we call core activities, and it is what I mentioned about knowledge management. It is about producing a global review on SPP every 3 years. So we did one in 2012, and we're working on the 2016 one now, and also on participating and organizing on a periodical basis webinars. These are the outputs of the various groups that I mentioned that have been active in the last 2 years. You can see at the bottom right the publication of the global review. All these can be found online, and I think we have provided you the link to those publications. Important thing also is that for you to know that we're connected very closely to Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG 12.7, that really encourages governments to put in place SPP policies, and we are, in the framework of our program, working on a methodology to measure indicator 12.7.1, i.e. really to find out who are the countries, which countries are really implementing SPP, providing the sub-indicators and the evidence about implementation, real implementation of SPP. This is what we're working on right now. So to finish, we wanted you to be aware of this global framework, which is not centered on sustainable buildings, but it's really about promoting SPP at government level, also making sure that all the players on SPP are assembled on one platform. It's about really making others aware of what you're doing. So you're welcome to join, and this will allow you to access a broad network of over 100 organizations and experts working together to implement SPP, to share your experience. So we organize periodically webinars where you can really present your experience, and also to benefit from advice and technical support on SPP implementation. And on top of that, it's completely free. Thank you very much, and I think we're ready to hand over to Josh.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Josh Radoff.
Yes, we hear you.
Angie, are you going first?
Yes, actually, at this point, I believe we need to hand it back to Debbie Farid, and she will pull up the slides for Steve Gordon. Thank you.
Okay, this is Curt Garrigan. Thank you, Farid. Farid's my colleague in Paris at UNEP. As Farid mentioned, and as you probably saw in the final slide, UNEP and ICLEI are co-leads in the Sustainable Public Procurement program of the 10YFP. There is also the Sustainable Buildings and Construction program of the 10YFP. And UNEP is a co-lead in that program as well. ICLEI and UNEP have joined to serve as co-leads for this public procurement thematic under the Building Efficiency Accelerator, so that the knowledge and the resources that are developed through those two 10YFP programs can also be brought to the cities in the Accelerator. Just as a review, this is the second of 3 webinars that are planned in this thematic. And we'll review essentially why we're focusing on procurement and think it's important for Accelerator cities. One of the key points is that using the power and the process of public procurement can really drive energy efficiency and have significant benefits not just for the cities and the governments themselves, but in the overall markets. So for cities themselves, obviously lower energy costs, the ability to demonstrate leadership, but more importantly, leveraging the purchasing power of government to stimulate energy efficiency markets at the local level. This has significant benefit because, as the World Bank has indicated, the top 600 cities in the world account for 60% of global GDP, and if a portion of that economic impact is directed towards energy efficiency, that could have a significant energy savings as well as the GHG mitigation potential. It also encourages thinking about value over service life and long-term life cycle costing. Despite those benefits, there are still some barriers, and some of those barriers we'll try to address today, but the Efficiency Accelerator, Building Efficiency Accelerator, is well positioned to help cities overcome some of those barriers through its activities at the local level. Those barriers are fairly common in many cities. They include information, restrictive policies, lack of incentives, risk aversion, and that is kind of a key aspect in many local governments, is that they don't want to change their own behavior or the status quo because they know the status quo at least works, and they may, though, be missing out on some of the long-term benefits. So there are government and risk issues that need to be addressed and overcome, but the opportunities are very significant, both, again, in terms of energy savings and the ability to do energy efficient purchasing. Next. So one of the things that we'll be focusing on in both the delivery at the local level through the Accelerator is mainstreaming sustainable public procurement policies to develop best practices both in building performance and overall efficiency, stimulate markets again so that there's greater awareness and availability and affordability of greener products and goods and services. And some of the mechanisms or tools that are available include labeling and certification, and then the mechanisms that the local governments have at their disposal include regulation, executive orders, administrative actions that could be embedded within procurement processes. But there are clear benefits from such program implementation. We reviewed this at the last webinar as well. For instance, the city of Berlin, from an investment of 43 million euro, is generating annual savings of 3.4 million euro just through energy performance contracts. So the impact on local market can be significant, and that's partly a co-benefit of the development of the Building Efficiency Accelerator. It's not just making buildings in a local market more energy efficient, but it is stimulating broader benefits. This series, again, is a three-part webinar series. The first one is available, as Aris mentioned, on the knowledge management platform at C2E2 that was held in July. This one is focused on delivery systems, procurement strategies, and there will be one more that will look at more specifically at legal instruments, pricing systems, and working with local markets. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce a former colleague of mine, Dr. Steve Gordon, who is at the University of Virginia now, but has been the Director of Procurement for the City of Nashville and the City of Alexandria, Virginia, and is well recognized as an expert not only in public procurement, but also in sustainable procurement.
Thank you, Curt. Thank you very much. It's really good to be with all of you today, and especially with my former colleague, Curt. It's been a while since he and I had seen one another, and he and I worked together while we were in the metropolitan government of Nashville and Davidson County, Tennessee, to implement sustainability in many of our construction processes, activities, as well as the end products of the construction. So Curt, it's just great to be with you today. It really is. My presentation today reflects three very strongly held personal beliefs. First, that the procurement function in government can do much more than assure policy and process compliance. Secondly, procurement in government, if properly staffed and empowered, can provide tremendous support for all of the public sector entities' strategic goals, including sustainability and energy efficiency goals. And third, elected officials and managers in governments need to recognize and act on this reality. I work for a part of the University of Virginia that I like to say focuses its academic activities on the more relevant and practical aspects of what goes in government. And one of those activities is procurement. And as Curt has mentioned, sustainable procurement has been an area of research focus and practice focus for me for many years. And so I continue to, as I have moved to UVA, as we call it, to evangelize on this subject of sustainable procurement. My goal today is very simple. I want to share with you information that you can actually use, and having listened to the previous webinar, I want to be sure that I do not duplicate unnecessarily what you heard in the previous webinar. If I do, we can just write it off to what the academicians call reinculcation. I think that's a big word for it. So if you, and that'll be a nice substitute for using the word redundant. So let's move on. Okay. I once had a professor who would always write his outline for his lectures on the board, and he would say that I do this so that in case you fall asleep while I'm talking, when you wake up, you'll know where I am. So these are the 6 principal points I want to address today. My relevant experience. I want to talk a little bit about the context of sustainable, energy efficient building and related procurement. I want to look at the procurement cycle, but not in excruciating, painful detail. But I do want to point out some key points in that cycle. I want to look at a performance-based scope of work as it's the one we use, Curt, in Nashville, because I think it's the kind of thing you may, in your government, you may not want to adopt it just as is, but it may give you some ideas for how you may want to structure your own. But it does contain the key elements, but everything, as we all know, is a work in progress. So I will offer it to you as is, and you can take it and use it as you will. I also want to, next to last, to focus on just some quick keys to success. I've identified several, but there are many more that I'm sure that I will leave out. And Angie, as far as the questions, are we going to do this immediately after, or are we going to do this at the end? We'll do the questions at the end. Okay. All right. Okay. Rather than say, you can look at this and say, well, this guy is either an old guy, he's been around a long time, or he's an experienced. So let's go with the latter. And I have served in a lot of roles, as Curt referred to, in and around the governmental procurement function. I have been a procurement practitioner in local government. During the first 10 years of my career, I was the director of research and education for a group known as NIGP, which is the premier association of public procurement officials in the world. And it is primarily state and local government focused as opposed to federal, but there are some members of federal procurement officials who belong to NIGP. I was for a while the education manager for World Bank corporate procurement, where I came into contact with, of course, with this whole subject of sustainable procurement and sustainable buildings. And finally, for the past 6 years, I have become a professor, having stood up a program in procurement at Old Dominion University, and I'm now at the University of Virginia, as Curt pointed out. So you can see some of the things that I've done there. Very early on in my career, I was involved in one of the first cogen projects with the city of Palm Springs, California. I was involved in the early discussions of energy savings performance contracting when it was still, while the theory was still being worked out. So it brought back a lot of memories as I was going through as I was listening to the prior seminar. I've done a lot of work also in performance-based contracting, which is really what the direction for which I come. Everything that I do, whether in procurement or anything else, is about results. As I said in my introductory remarks, policies are important, processes are important, but procurement should drive and support the enterprise goals of local governments and other public entities, and it also should support their clients, agencies and departments within those governments, who in turn also must support the enterprise goals of their entities. Sustainable procurement, Curt and I worked on several of those, as I mentioned earlier, and in Nashville. In many ways, sometimes it was on facility construction. Other times it was how we would reclaim land for nature centers. Just a variety of ways. And even on sewer projects, we would figure out ways to make those projects more sustainable, relying on our purchasing power and the availability of what we could pull out of the marketplace in the way of ideas and innovations. And finally, in Nashville, we also worked on a concept known as beneficial reuse, where, among other things, instead of just flaring off methane gas from our landfills, we would actually use that methane gas to power government facilities. That's become quite commonplace, but when we were doing it in Nashville, it was fairly cutting edge. Okay, here's the context of that I've already referred to. Sustainable procurement is a strategy or a means to achieving sustainability as a strategic goal, which in turn supports what? Obviously the strategic management of government. So in thinking about this contextually, when we're faced with any particular, I like to call it not a requirement, or I would prefer to use the word opportunity when a procurement presents itself, we should look at, what is, what ideally could be, what could be or can be, what are our own site capabilities in the way of procurement capacity, procurement capabilities, SMEs, technology, as well as what on-site resources are available to us. And we've already heard about, prior to my presentation this morning, and in the previous webinar, about various resources that are available to you. And as you heard, many of those resources are free, and free is a very good price. So you also have the body of experience. I once had a mentor say how valuable it is to draw upon the body of experience, and he would say that you not only want to not reinvent the wheel, you also do not want to reinvent the flat tire. So the body of experience, and finally just all the environmental elements that all of us who work in local government, state government, or federal government, national government, whatever type of government you work in, are very well aware with, not the least of which is politics. Okay. Here's the busy slide that I've told you was coming. I've warned you on this, and we're not going to work through all of this, but I'll leave this with you as a guide or a step-by-step process check that you can use. In sustainable procurement, as in any area of procurement, all of these phases are important. But if I have to say that some are especially important and have not been executed as well as they should have been, I would point to both. I would point to procurement planning, solicitation planning, and to contract administration and contract closeout. And just to highlight a few points there, just to start at procurement planning, the number one thing there, it's critical to know the outcomes that we want achieved, that we need to achieve, and that we can achieve. And in doing so, it's, this, in fact, if you were to look at any procurement whether it's for sustainability or anything else that has not gone well, is because the requirements, and again I want to add the word, the opportunities, in this case for sustainability, were not properly identified. Okay? And that's not to say that when you go into the market with an RFP that the marketplace will not come back to you with additional ideas that you can use, because it may very well, that's the benefit of going with a strategic procurement approach. But to the extent possible, you should define what do you want to get done. And you're going to see that on a slide in a minute, because strategic procurement, in this case strategic sustainable procurement, is all about what you want to get done as opposed to what you want to do. Okay? Hopefully you understand. I know that feels like I'm parsing words. It's a very important distinction. And in government procurement, we tend to focus so much on 3, the solicitation process, and 4, the source selection process. But we cannot neglect 1, 2, 5, and 6. And if you look, just quickly look up under 5, it's very important. Under 6 rather, if you look at item 5 under contract closeout, capture feedback and share lessons learned. And that's important. You know, you all are working as a community, so when you have experiences, things go well, things don't go well, step up, share that information, share your successes, share your failures, share the things that you wish you had done if you could do it all over again, because odds are you're going to be given the opportunity to do it all again. So I'll run over that very quickly. Hopefully that's this whole chart will be useful for you. Okay, let's talk now about how to structure a performance-based statement of work, which I refer to as a statement of objectives or a SOO. Now, we don't have a lot of time to spend on this, but this is how I organized it. Curt, you're very familiar with this approach because this is what we use in Nashville. You start out by saying, what is your high-level purpose and intent of the solicitation? So that's obviously going to be, even at a high level, specific to whatever project or product or service you're going to procure. And then you will look at the required performance outcomes. And again, these are the things that you want to get done. You may want, obviously in the context of sustainable buildings, some of your high-level performance outcomes is we want to reduce energy consumption to the extent possible and practical. Notice that there are no measurements at this level. Notice that there are none. Okay. You might want to say we want to reduce greenhouse gases, but to the extent possible and practical. You get the idea. We could keep going, but that's the idea. And then you go into other responsibilities of the contractor. Okay. Now, in this other responsibilities section, you have moved from asking the prospective contractors to tell you how they would achieve those objectives. And by the way, when they're coming back to you, they are going to tell you what is possible, what are the measurement standards they would use, how would they apply those, how you would apply those standards and all that. So that's not lost. And also, you as a government may also include those measurement standards and the measurement procedures and processes as well under the other responsibilities. But the other responsibilities can include just such obvious things like when you go into the building, turn on the lights, and when you leave, turn them off. So it could be something that simple as well. But I won't trivialize that point. Constraints, I think that speaks for itself. There are certain things that you may or may not be able to do, just depending on the project. So you want to enumerate these constraints in your scope of work, which you're giving to the potential proposers or bidders on your project. Obviously, you want to indicate the responsibilities that you have as a government, which includes such obvious things as making yourself available, providing the information the contractor will need when they're performing the contract and so forth. If incentives are going to be provided, or if incentives can be proposed by the offerers, you need to tell them that in the scope of work. And you also need to indicate instructions regarding the content and the format of the proposals, how the proposals will be evaluated, how the contractor's performance will be evaluated, and so forth. So that's a general idea of how a statement of objectives type scope of work differs from a more traditional scope of work. Okay. Performance outcome objectives, again, speak to what the contractor must get done, not do, and what the contractor must enable others to get done. So it could be either of those or both. And so again, as I said earlier, the government may specify an applicable performance measurement standard in the minimum performance requirement based on that standard and so forth. Or in some cases, if it doesn't know, it actually may require the respondent to include one or more of these things in its proposal. It just depends on what it is you're procuring. Here's an obvious an example of how performance requirements and scopes of work can take other forms. So, and this is different from those broad outcome objectives that we talked about earlier. So if you're buying a particular machine or device, you may say that it's, let's say for example, if it's fuel efficiency, that it's supposed to achieve a certain fuel efficiency based on a certain standard as measured, as applied to a certain process. So that's an obvious example of that. Okay. Okay, keys to success. Again, these may seem fairly obvious, but I think they need to be brought out. Competent and reliable contractors and contractor teams. You sit there and say, "Duh, Steve," you know, that's really very obvious, but it's so essential, because if you're not working with competent and reliable contractors, you can do all these other wonderful things, and you will be doing it to no end. Okay, so it's very, very important, and it's why you don't just rush to select a contractor or a contractor team. Obviously, you need to have the right mix of individuals who are competent and reliable on the government side of the contract, in the right places, doing the right things, and you need to have a qualified independent proposal evaluation panel. Again, no biases is one of the key things. Another small point, you don't want to include in both employees and bosses on the same panel for obvious reasons. So there's a lot of things that we don't have time to go into. And here's some of the things that are also important is when you're looking at competencies and past performance. Both of these are essential elements of evaluating proposals for performance-based contracts. You need to look at the past performance and the competencies of the team as a whole, each member of the proposed team, and each key individual proposed to be involved. And next to last, you need to work out issues in a good way at the lowest possible level rather than in a bad way. And finally, you have to be committed to quality and continuous improvement. Okay. For now, I will defer to the question time, but if you want to reach me later, there's my my email address at UVA, and also you have my my work phone at UVA. So it's been great talking to you. Thank you.
And Angie, passing it back to you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to represent ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, on this webinar today. And I want to remind everyone that we do have a Sustainable Procurement Resource Center and a Procurement of Innovation platform available for your consideration. As Steve mentioned in his keys to success today, one of the keys to success being a competent and reliable staff on the government side working on the procurement. And that's what ICLEI is here to do. We are a network of local governments across the globe working towards the goal of creating sustainable cities. And one of the ways we do that is through our Sustainable Procurement Center. We're celebrating 20 years this year of sustainable public procurement. And the staff is here to provide resources and assistance to you as you go forward with your procurements. And at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Josh Radoff is joining us today from YR&G. Josh is the co-founder and principal at YR&G. He holds a master's in sustainable energy from the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm and a master's of electrical engineering from Columbia University in New York. He provides technical and strategic sustainable services for companies, communities, and building projects globally, and is a member of the U.S. Green Building Council's Market Advisory Committee. He regularly consults on design and construction of projects seeking certification through LEED, Weyl building, and other frameworks. And so, Josh, I welcome you now to present, and thank you for joining us.
Okay. Thank you so much, Angie, and thank you to everyone for having me. Let's see, I am just pulling up my screen here. You should be able to see it now, and now I'm in presentation mode. Please let me know if there's anything that you can't see. Anyway, so I am going to try to give a private sector representation. My firm, I'll tell you a little bit about my firm, but we are often on the receiving end of procurement projects, sustainability projects in the built environment, and we end up navigating a lot of things that work really well and a lot of things that cause a lot of confusion and make it very difficult for project success. So I want to sort of touch on some of both of those elements and hopefully leave you with a sense of what those elements are and some ideas for how to potentially structure a good RFP and how to structure a good process to ensure success. So just a little bit about YR&G. We're a sustainability consultancy based in the U.S. We have these 4 locations around the country. I'm sitting in Boulder, Colorado this morning. And we do projects around the world. So we have a lot of experience with implementing things like LEED certification in the U.S., but we're also familiar with BREEAM and Estidama or Green Star or 3-Star or Green Mark or whatever the certification program for green building is in your neck of the woods. They all have similar aspects to them. And then in terms of our spectrum of services, we kind of help projects everywhere from master planning to building design and construction to existing building performance and operations. And what I will talk about today sort of overlaps with all of the above, but I would say the emphasis is on design and construction and to a lesser degree master planning support. But increasingly what we're interested in is building performance. So understanding how actual project design and construction goals translate into performance is a really key element. So, and we also do some corporate sustainability work, helping projects kind of roll up their built environment goals up into their larger corporate goals. So that's enough about us. Let me start by saying when we look at RFPs
Josh,
or
sorry
when
to
we ask
interrupt
clients
you,
what their goal.
but we
Yes?
still see the first slides of your presentation.
Oh, thank you for interrupting me. I'm not sure why that would be. I'm going out of presentation mode. Can you see?
Yeah, we can see now.
Can you see it now? Okay, I'll just minimize, and so maybe it'll be less graphically wonderful. But as long as you can see it, let me just try toggling. Okay, I'll have to do this. Okay, so well, Angie, I suppose we can post any of the slides that we went through, but those are mostly introduction slides about the company. In terms of, so when we start a project, as I was saying, there is a real range of clarity in terms of what clients say that they want. And when I say clients, that can mean everything from a school district that's building a new school, a housing authority project that's building a new apartment building or neighborhood. It could be a federal building that's building a new office building, or it could be a master developer looking to build a new campus, mixed-use campus. So when I say clients or projects, it really could fall into any kind of bucket. And a lot of times the first thing, what a lot of clients will say is, we just want a sustainable building. We just want a green building. Can you do that for us? That would be nice. And that's obviously confusing. That could mean any number of different things. And then moving up, some clients will say we want a LEED certified project, and sort of assuming that LEED or whatever certification is the equivalent of a clear green building goal. And LEED has so much variability in it that you are not really sure what you're going to get in that context. So then we get into specific metrics, and I'll talk a lot about specific metrics, but these are things like energy use intensity targets or specific daylight requirements around things like daylight autonomy. And then those are helpful, but I think even more helpful is using specific metrics with required process steps. So things like conduct a charrette or conduct a series of sustainability workshops, perform energy modeling with X number of iterations, whatever. And I'll show you some examples of those. Then we get into things that I would call absolute goals. Those are things like build a net zero energy project. And that really kind of gets very specific in terms of both the process you're going to have to go through in order to pull that off and how to operationalize it. And which brings us to the last one, which is operational requirements. And recognizing that just because you have the good intention of setting out an energy efficiency goal or a daylight goal or a water goal or whatever, that so much of success is going to be dependent on how that building is used, how the staff are trained, and how they provide ongoing feedback to operators and occupants about how it's working to continue improvement. And most people leave that out because it's not part of the design and construction process, but it's really critical, and there's a variety of ways to incorporate that. So I will say that this is hard. The reason that people struggle with sustainable procurement is because there's a lot of confusion. And a lot of what I'm talking about, by the way, I think follows on what Dr. Gordon was speaking about somewhat nicely. And we're in the procurement planning phase of his very interesting diagram. And this is in some ways coming up with the best way to formulate a statement of objective. So using that parlance. So in the barriers and challenges, things that are difficult are you start a project in the concept phase, and you don't know what that building is going to cost you. You don't know if you can afford a LEED Platinum building or a net zero energy building or whatever until you get into the thick of it and start evaluating the different trade-offs. Plus the costs themselves are a moving target. Anyone who's tried to procure solar recently for a building project will see that by the time you start the project and when the project comes online, that price hopefully will have fallen by 25% or so. It's been a pretty amazing trend. But there are things that move the other way, like the cost of steel. There are a variety of unknown constraints. You have an idea that you want solar access to put solar on the roof, for example, but you don't really know what the shading is from surrounding buildings yet. There may be, you haven't evaluated how the utility is going to value what you're doing, so that makes it hard to do things like get into storage or renewables in some case, although it should be agnostic to energy efficiency. And then technology, the green building world's been a really exciting world because technology is so has been evolving so quickly. I listed batteries, but probably a better one is LED lights. A couple of years ago, those were kind of on the fence about whether teams were going to put those in, and now it's almost every project does LED lighting and very strong lighting performance as a matter of course. And then also building off of what Steve said, different teams yield different results. You can have the best written RFP, and if you don't go through an interview process where you really kind of force them to show their hand and understand their capability and their process, you are unlikely to sort of get what you want. I would say it requires a certain amount of creativity, problem solving, and iterative process rather than hoping just to wrap up a project and get it done. And then lastly, there's this push and pull between whether you're setting actual performance targets, meaning measuring how much how much energy the building actually uses once it's in operation, versus design targets. Okay, when we get into energy performance metrics, I should note that there's a few ways that people deal with it. One is a reduction relative to code. Another is using energy use intensity targets. And finally, you know, you could sort of go after a net zero energy building, or there are sometimes people just say, we're looking for energy efficiency, therefore get LEED certified, which doesn't make sense, but it may be a backdoor way into the same goal. And some projects have stated, you know, forget energy, we want a carbon budget, so we can just translate the energy metrics into carbon. Using an energy reduction goal can be challenging just because the energy codes keep moving and getting better and better. So you may start a project under, say, ICC 2009, and by the time you submit to the city, or the project submitted to the city, the code may have moved, and the target energy efficiency will have moved as well. So you have to be really aware of where the codes are, where they're going, and how that translates into an efficiency target. I like to start projects by pulling up, this is a report from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory that essentially translates energy codes for different building types into EUI. So if I was working on a medium office building, I would know that the sort of current code, ASHRAE 9.1 2013, or which is the same as ICC 2015, you know, that I'm starting with an EUI energy use intensity target of 34.1 kV2 per square feet per year. And that's an important number to work with, because then I might want to sort of achieve some reduction off of that, but I can be really clear. I also like to do as much research as I can to find out how other buildings are achieving this. This is from the Department of Energy's Building Performance Database. So this is telling me for this project type, and I think I pulled up a school in a given state, I think I pulled up Oregon, that my average EUI is 51 and that the best is down under 30. And so that lets me know that, you know, if I want a high-performing building, I might want to sort of write an RFP under 30. And I have some hope that my project team can deliver that because I contextualized it. This is just an example of doing some precedent research for a given small office building and looking at just the ranges of very high-performing buildings in the U.S. and what the range of EUI is. So again, here's my new code office building, a 34, so I'd assume I need to be better than that. And I know that the best that I could find out there, the new RMI headquarters in Bristol, Colorado, and the Bullitt Center in Seattle, Washington, are in the 16-17 range. So that really gives me a window to start targeting and that I know is achievable. A lot of projects will go with a net zero energy goal now, which is arguably the most advanced goal, but it's a little arbitrary. It depends on how much roof area you have. So here's just a simple graphic that's showing that a two-story building is essentially net zero energy ready if it meets code. It could fit, if it could sort of essentially fit all the solar on the roof. When you get to be a three-story building, that becomes more difficult. You know, you need a 37% reduction from the latest version of code, or an EUI of 21.5, which is really hard. And if you go above 3 stories, it gets even harder. So it's a temptation to just say, let's go and be net zero energy, but there's a lot of nuance within that. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit and point to some elements of RFPs that we've seen out there. This is an article from the ASHRAE Journal in 2015, which among others, which I recommend as a resource, but among other things talks about NREL, which is the National Renewable Energy Lab, their procurement process when they built their RSF facility. And they essentially developed some program metrics and divided them into a couple categories so that the project teams could respond to these. And some are mission critical, they absolutely have to happen, including achieve LEED Platinum and, but then the highly desirable projects include an EUI target. There you see the 25 kV2 per square feet, including the data center, so even more specificity. They also have a reduction target from code, 50% reduction from ASHRAE, in this case, back when they did it, 90.1 2004. And then under, if possible, net zero design approach. So there's some flexibility baked into this, and it really sort of drives getting what they want, and in this case, sort of creating tiers of preference. And this project was built. It achieves net zero energy. It's got about 3 megawatts worth of solar, I believe. and achieved an ultimate EUI of 33. This was another example, maybe less sophisticated, from a school district, but the school district was informing several new builds, new construction projects, and so what they have done is, first of all, saying designed to meet LEED 2014, LEED version 4, the equivalent of silver certification. So they're starting with a certification component, then they're being very specific about the energy use intensity targets that they're looking for teams to meet, and then they add that, and then this gets to be somewhat redundant, they also want a 35 to 40% reduction in energy costs. So when you bake all these things together, it ends up being that there really are no ways to game the system, and this ends up being a pretty good approach. And this also assumes that they've done some research to know that this is achievable and is cost effective, and that when the team comes around and says, we don't think we could do that because it's too costly, the client, in this case the school district, can say, yes you can, we've done the research, prove it to me that you can, and so it's a much more informed decision. And it's not just energy. Under daylight, this district was very clear about using spatial daylight autonomy, which is a LEED version 4 metric, or managing glare through the annual sun exposure, again another LEED version 4 metric. So that was really important in informing that it wasn't just about energy, it was about a lot of other attributes that make a green school, including waste reduction and water efficiency. And these are all metrics that are easy to lay out. Some things that are harder are use things like long-term durability and maintenance costs. And that's really something that requires a process check. So at the end of schematic design, the team should be expected to say, here's our plan for long-term durability and maintenance costs. We are very specifically and deliberately addressing these different pieces. Similarly, with use of materials to emphasize a connection to nature or biophilic design, that's very much something that's in the eye of the beholder, and is important to sort of report out on how that's being met. Lastly, I think it's important that they included some things that really sort of are process related that help achieve success, like what should the team be led by? Professionals experienced in the sustainable design process. You should do a charrette. You should do building energy modeling, including thermal comfort for the project. So there's a lot of things in there process-wise that are helpful, and then under selecting HVAC, performance system comparison early in the design process. So these are all sort of good points that they can hold a team accountable to. So another example, this is a neighborhood project that we worked on with the Denver Housing Authority, and we helped them write their RFP because they weren't necessarily getting the kind of results that they wanted. And there's some very similar things in here that you'll see. Things like achieve LEED Gold. In this case, also use Enterprise Green Communities, which is an affordable housing program. But then some more very specific things like evaluate at least 5 different strategies to get to net zero using efficiency and renewables. Be very specific that we want our roof covered with PV and not mechanical equipment. These are really good. And then also, very similar to NREL, achieve a reduction goal, but also have an absolute goal. This is essentially an EUI translated to carbon reduction, so 8 pounds of CO2 per square foot. And then other things to sort of ensure success, provide an energy monitoring system capable of providing feedback to occupants and operators. So a lot of good stuff there. And then lastly, as an example to wrap up, something that's probably the most complete, we've been helping the New York City School Construction Authority develop their Green Schools Guide and essentially update it to use LEED version 4. And again, there's a lot of really similar components to this, which in this case, they're not just saying meet LEED v4, they're saying, first of all, at the bottom, you achieve 40 points on the scorecard that we created, and we're going to create a few categories. Some credits that all projects have to achieve, some credits that you should do if it's feasible, so we'll give you some flexibility, and then some additional bonus points to get there. And they create their own scorecard, which essentially just translates LEED, in this case LEED version 4, to their building types and is really specific about which credits are important to them. And these are just more examples of it. But also you see those credits required for all projects, credits required if it's feasible, and so forth. And then lastly, they have a very, I would say, regimented process where where the school construction authority is performing reviews, process reviews, to make sure they're on track to hit those goals at different stages of design, and that goes on into construction. So what I would say is the takeaways for this are that it's important you can make a really complicated RFP, so balance simplicity with the nuance that there's a lot going on here. So there's something really easy about just taking a lead scorecard, annotating it, state what you want, and then using that in your RFP. Be specific about your performance metrics. Don't just say be energy efficient. Build in as much as you can to address actual performance and operational issues. So anything that you could do to say, here's the process for ensuring ongoing sustainability, like monitoring-based commissioning, for example. Include detailed process items so you don't short-circuit necessary evaluation in the design process, meaning like conduct several rounds of energy modeling. Don't allow a team to just give you one, for example. I really like to be included in the interviews with architects and contractors. So in the RFP, you can require that a sustainability lead be there. And then lastly, this elusive idea of if your building actually delivers, how do you incentivize design teams to actually sort of be committed to helping to ensure those that ultimate performance. So with that, I'll say thank you. This is my contact information if you have additional questions, but I'm happy to answer some at the end as well. I will turn the presenter back to, is it Angie?
Josh, why don't you just go ahead and send it on back to UNEP, the organizer, because I think we're ready to wrap up now and take some questions. That was all very good information, as well as some great information from Steve Gordon. So I'd like to just go ahead and open it up, if we could, to questions from our attendees.
So regarding the question, please, if you would like to make a question, you can use the question feature that has the GoToWebinar system, or you can just raise your hand and we'll give you a microphone privilege in order to say your question to the panelists.
Okay, while we're waiting for folks to load up their questions here in the question panel on GoToWebinar, perhaps I could ask Josh a follow-up question. How have you consulted with a local government, state government, or school district in terms of helping them create the RFP? You mentioned the Denver Housing Authority, but that seems like it might be an outlier. How involved have you been in setting up procurement requirements, and what would you suggest for our attendees to consider in that regard?
Sure. So I think the other example there with the New York School Construction Authority is a good one. I think, in that case, we are helping them to translate the very sort of vague world of the LEED certification into both specific performance metrics that are within LEED, they exist within LEED, but you have to be really clear about what you want. And part of that conversation is understanding what's achievable right now, what's achievable in different contexts, in other words, how much flexibility to build into those requirements, and then what are the different process steps that are meaningful but not sort of overburdensome for a project team to, in order to sort of know when you want to review different goals or progress, when you expect to see different results, say, of daylight modeling or energy modeling, and then also helping them to write into those same guidelines or requirements, the operational expectations that are going to be part of the design and construction procurement process. So for example, I think every project should have a what we call a performance and operations plan for sustainability. So before any building operator takes hold of it, there's a meeting with all of the existing team and the design team, and you could say it's part of the commissioning process, but which talks about their energy management practice, their indoor air quality and environmental quality management practice. So there's a lot of opportunity, even in the RFP, to be really clear about putting out guidelines or requirements that are not overburdensome, that there's a high confidence that are achievable, and that's kind of what we help with, but also the different process steps to be meaningful. So I'd say that has been the case for that sort of form of support that we've provided has come up in a few different variations, but those are two good examples. And the school districts obviously had some, we didn't help them write the RFP, we responded to it that I mentioned as the other example in there, and it looks like they clearly had some kind of consulting support, because they're really thoughtfully written guidelines for the most part. So there's a lot, I think it's really important to sort of understand those different components and include them in writing an RFP.
Great, thank you. Do we have other questions?
Angie, yes, we have an attendee raise his hand. His name is Basilio Danino. 1 second. Okay, Basilio, can you hear us? You can speak now if you want.
I have a written question. Is it possible to find a source bibliography connecting building sustainability performance indicators with financial ones?
Okay, thank you, Basilio. I think the question is it possible to find a source connecting building sustainability performance indicators with financial ones?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you, Basilio.
So I'll toss that to either Josh or Steve. And so this would be, is there, for example, a cost associated with the energy performance, and how would one obtain that sort of information? What sort of additional cost, I suppose, or life cycle costs?
Steve, would you like to go first?
I'm still trying to figure out the question here. So are you asking what additional cost is associated with the energy performance? I'm not sure I understand what they're driving at. Curt, do you understand what this?
Well, I think, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, Steve, feel free to build off this, but I think a question that comes up a lot is, does a given level of energy or sustainability performance translate to a certain amount of fixed costs increase?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, from our perspective, there certainly are studies on that. There's also been studies about the cost of net zero energy buildings, not just high-performing efficiency buildings, and that's I think the real truthful answer is you could look at data out there and use it to make a good case, but that it tends to be very project specific. But I will say that another opportunity for the RFP process is to ask project teams, including whoever's responsible for budgeting, usually the contractor, to participate in an iterative first cost optimization so that things like your improved building envelope and lighting should translate into reduced cost of your HVAC and mechanical equipment. We worked on one project, which was a university building, which had no net cost premium, and achieved what I would consider sort of best in class in terms of energy efficiency because it was willing to take so much time and do those trade-offs. And I'd like to say it was because the RFP was written so well, but it was more that there was an architect who was very good at leading the process. So the short answer is yes, there are many studies that talk about the achievability of different performance levels and the cost increases associated with those that are out there. But I've found that on a project-specific conversation, it's variable, but that it's really important that RFPs be structured so that that kind of iterative pricing with a first cost reduction, not just a life cycle cost analysis, but a first cost reduction analysis is performed as a part of the process.
Okay. Josh, thank you for getting that started. That was a big help because I'm working on about 4 hours of sleep last night, so I appreciated you starting the chewing gum. Now I can continue to chew it, so thanks for that.
My pleasure.
What Basilio has, the question he has raised is really, a classic one in local government when you're dealing with any type of thing where you're trying to consider not just really the cost to buy, but rather the cost, to own something over its useful and productive life. So, Josh, you're very correct to point out that it really is very specific to the project, and yes, there is plenty of data out there. But one of the things that I touched on in one of my slides may apply here. I mean, I didn't touch it; it was in one of my slides, but I didn't really point it out. Is something we would do when we were faced with any type of project where there were unknowns like this, and that would be the whole idea of either doing requests for information or or hiring a very good consultant like you, or convening what we called a government industry pre-solicitation conference. And in Nashville, we were fortunate enough to have the profile and the market power that when we were faced with a situation like this, we were able to actually bring in technical and economic experts from the major players in that particular industry, and just sit them around the table and and kick around questions like this. What would be the cost? What would be the potential externalities and the like? So that's what I would add to that.
Thank you both. Any other questions from our attendees?
Yes, we have from Katie Bonne. Katie Bonne, can you hear us? You can speak now.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask, the question is directed to the professor from Harvard University. In terms of your time with local government, how have you been able to change the conventional way of procurement to that of a more sustainable way of procuring goods and services, and how have you been able to win the participation and the work with other departments within the local government? And also when it comes to the small businesses that are actually providing services to local government, was there any education that was done to educate them on how to go about procuring or providing goods and services to local government? Because also those are key to what you can call economic development, especially within our context in developing countries. So how have you been able to involve them for them to understand the process of sustainability within the procurement processes?
Eddie, that is, you've raised two, possibly three very, very important issues. And I'll start with the first one, is how, and it's really one I touched on in the beginning of my presentation, is the changing role and really philosophy and orientation of the people who do procurement in government. I mean, that's very important. And due to the way procurement laws have been written historically, they have placed such a premium on compliance and process, and that's just the nature of the beast, as opposed to results, whether it's sustainability or any other type of outcome you're trying to achieve. And and frankly, we're right now in the process of, when I say we, I would say those of us who either are still in the public procurement profession or are working, with the public procurement profession. We are, I would say, we are incrementally seeing a change in the orientation and behavior of public procurement officials. But it's part of it is going to change due to the retirement of many people who are, who have reached retirement age and moving out of the workforce, and the replacement of these individuals, from a different generation who have a different way of viewing the world. And thankfully, in many cases, sustainability is one of the things that they value. So I think it always comes back. We can talk in broad abstract terms, but it always comes back to people. And so I think, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but you're going to see, I think, within the next 4 to 5 years, a dramatic difference in the type of person who is engaged in public procurement, who understands that the need to, that the procurement function surely has to enforce policy and process compliance, but it also has to support strategic results, and which is going to require individuals who have not only the technical understandings and skills in procurement, but all the soft skills and the personality traits that will enable them to work with others, including their clients within the local governments, including those individuals in the industry and other stakeholders in the procurement process, to make sure that the results that need to be accomplished get accomplished. So hopefully that answers the first part of your question, or at least hopefully somewhat responsive. Secondly, on the question of educating businesses on how they need to respond as governments move to different ways of procuring goods, services, solutions, and infrastructure. Again, it's a people process, and this was a lesson we learned initially in Nashville when we did not, it's always, hindsight is always 20/20, but we sprang some new innovative approaches on people without properly educating the business community, which included both large businesses and small businesses. So, Curt, you'll remember some of those days when we were changing things. So that was a lesson learned for us. So it's key to still basic things of communicate, but not communicate as a process, but to communicate in the direction of assuring that the partners in the business community understand where, number one, where we're headed and how we're going to get there, and also to get their feedback on how the ways we're thinking about as our means for getting there can be improved to make them not only more friendly to the business community, but also more productive toward the achievement of our sustainability and other goals. And there was a third part of the question which had to do, I believe, with economic development. This is I think just a short answer to that, Katie, is that I think the push towards sustainability offers tremendous opportunities for economic development, whether it's with regard to products, services, solutions, infrastructure, or whatever. I'm speaking at a very high level, but those are the kind of things that will fall to the elected leadership of the individual local governments to identify what those opportunities are and to exploit them. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Am I allowed to ask another question? Okay, I just wanted to ask the reps from 10YFP that when does the next window open for call for proposal or for funding?
For the Sustainable Buildings Construction Program of the 10YFP, it's likely to be sometime next spring. It would be based on availability of funding. I don't know about the Sustainable Public Procurement program, but Farid is probably still on.
Yeah, we had our call. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. We had our call last year, and we awarded funding to 3 projects in the Philippines, in Cape Town, South Africa, and in Uruguay. And hopefully we will be relaunching a call in 2017. We'll keep you posted. Are you on our mailing list?
I don't think so. I'm from South Africa, city of Tshwane. So
Okay.
no, I'm not. I'm not.
Okay, so we'll make sure that...
Farid and Kadiboni, this is Debbie. I can make sure to connect the 2 of you by email.
Great. Yeah, and I take advantage of to say that we have been disseminating the information to our, we have a broad mailing list of about 3,000 contacts, SPP practitioners and decision makers at 12 level, and I'm pretty sure a number of them registered, so I just wanted to say hi and thanks for taking part. And I think it's a good example of collaboration between different programs of the 10 YFP that we're doing today, and I hope we'll be able to have more in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Curt. Let me just add also a little bit, Kadi, to the response to you. I think what you were asking goes to the issue of capacity building in local markets. And I think it is partly the responsibility of the local authorities to prepare the market for response to government procurement. That's certainly been the case in many local governments as it relates to engaging small and medium enterprises. But as some of these issues emerge related to sustainability, there's probably a much more thematic approach that needs to be developed by local authorities in conjunction with purchasing officers and others. That is actually one of the benefits of the Building Efficiency Accelerator, is that they are working in local markets to raise awareness, build capacity, prepare not just the government officials, but also the private sector to be responsive to energy efficiency in buildings. So again, the Building Efficiency Accelerator is somewhat tasked with promoting these issues. And then this particular thematic on public procurement is a resource by which some of those issues can arise in local communities.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Thank you, and we are just about out of time, so I think we will wrap up on Curt's note about building capacity. And I would echo that. I would say that my experience has been that procurement professionals have typically focused on the economic and performance specifications of a tender or an RFP, and what we're trying to do is to help to build that capacity for them to now incorporate social and environmental performance in their tenders and solicitations. And so that is part of what the Building Efficiency Accelerator is here to do. And we appreciate you all taking the time to attend our webinar today. Thank you very much to our presenters, Josh Radoff and Steve Gordon. And we look forward to hearing your questions again on our next webinar. We do not have a date for that yet, but it will likely be the first quarter of 2017. So with that, good day to everyone, and we will look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you very much.